I hope everyone is here ready to celebrate Bret Anthony Johnston. Bret is, as many of you know, often on this stage introducing us to some of our finest contemporary writers, or introducing us to bright new talents from the Michener Center for Writers. And so it's a particularly special occasion when we flip the tables and celebrate his latest collection with so many personal friends and admirers of his work. My name is Steve Ennis. I'm director of the Ransom Center, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this Austin book launch for Bret's Encounters with Unexpected Animals. Tonight's reading and conversation is co-sponsored by the Ransom Center and the Texas Book Festival. And I want to extend a word of welcome to our members and all of you who support a vibrant literary community here in Austin. Following this evening's reading, you're all invited to a reception and book signing in the lobby. As many of you will know, Bret is the best-selling author of the novels We Burn Daylight and Remember Me Like This, and the award-winning short story collection, Corpus Christi. His latest collection, just published, has received early critical acclaim, including a Pushcart Prize, and one of his stories, Time of the Preacher, was selected as one of the best American stories of 2025. We are told in one of these stories that a runaway, one of the characters in the story, could get to San Antonio by afternoon, Houston by supper, and Dallas by dark. A statement that fixes this story, if we trace that line backwards, fixes this story, like many in this collection, in the dry, thorny brushland of South Texas. Many of us have been there, down those two-lane blacktops, but in these stories, Bret insists that we slow down and take in the strip malls, the used car lots, the roadside motels, and the border checkpoints laden with menace. Bret has a gift for the well-chosen and particular detail of this world, and there's a temporal specificity as well to these stories. Sears is not yet bankrupt, Ray-Bans are still in fashion, and one may encounter a Datsun on the road. Bret's ear is equally attuned to the manner of these characters' speech, their phrasing, colloquialisms, and their verbal tics. The inhabitants of this patch of scrubland often struggle to express themselves, struggle to render in language their inner pain and their longing. But it's in his own sentences that soar and provide a counterweight to his characters' inadequacies and failings, achieving what he calls in one of these stories the intricate music of longing. The most remarkable feature of these stories is their humanity. The author's attention imbues these lives with some measure of dignity that often eluded them in life. What makes these stories so good is, as I imagine it, what makes Bret such an effective director of the Michener Center for Writers. There's an empathy for these broken down lives that gives them a degree of worth that they themselves may not even be able to articulate. One reviewer called these stories episodic tours of the heart. Yes, exactly. The novelist John Irving has called them flawless. While not exactly linked stories, they are united in time and place, reminiscent of a highly specific patch of ground, Bret's own Yoknapatawpha or Winesburg, Ohio. They are character studies of a highly specific community from a dozen oblique angles, and there's a growing and cumulative power to the collection as a whole. I want to congratulate Bret on a fine achievement. Following his reading, Bret will be joined on stage by novelist and historian Steve Harrigan for a conversation that I'm guessing might be about Texas, about storytelling, or might be about the mysteries of the heart. Steve Harrigan is the author of 12 books of both fiction and nonfiction, including the New York Times bestselling novel, The Gates of the Alamo, and a really big history of Texas called What Else But Big Wonderful Thing, as well as shorter pieces for many of our leading magazines, some of which have recently been collected in his most recent book, An Anchor in the Sea of Time. He's a friend of many of us here, and it's a special occasion to have him join Bret on stage this evening as well. Please join me in giving Bret Anthony Johnston a warm welcome.
I wish we could all just leave now. I'm just going to thank a lot of people so I don't have to read very long. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody at the Ransom Center. To be invited to read your work at the Ransom Center, I don't know if there is a higher honor for a contemporary writer, and then to be given such a generous introduction by Steve Ennis. I just really don't have any words aside from thank you. I'm really grateful. And I'm of course grateful to Steve Harrigan, who is, by my and basically everyone else's estimation, the most important living writer of nonfiction in Texas. So to speak with him tonight is, I think the word would be terrifying. And then, as Steve Ennis so kindly mentioned, that we're here because of the Texas Book Festival. And the Texas Book Festival does so many amazing things for the readers and writers in Texas. And at the forefront of that is Marianne and Dahlia. So I'm really grateful for their support and for bringing us all together tonight. I know that there's a number of very, very important people. Provost Imboden is here. Dean Sarah Ades is here. I am sure to disappoint them. First Light Books, thank you for selling books. And the last thing that I want to say is that this is my second time being invited to read at the Harry Ransom Center. And the first time that I was invited was for the novel We Burn Daylight. And that meant a great deal to me, not simply for the honor of being invited to speak at the Ransom Center, but because when I was writing and publishing that book, I had the great honor of working with a brilliant editor by the name of Mark Warren. And he made that book what it is, and that book is what got me invited here. Shortly after Mark edited that book and made it the best version of itself, he left Random House and he wrote a feature for Esquire magazine and won the Pulitzer Prize. And it's shocking and shockingly flattering to know that Mark is with us tonight. So can I ask everybody to help me thank Mark Warren for changing my life? So I'm just going to read a little bit from the last story in the book. This story owes its existence to the magazine American Short Fiction, and specifically to Rebecca and Adina, who helped it become the best version of itself. The bad news is that the story is basically a collage, and so there's no way for me to read it that is going to make any sense to you. The good news is that because it's not going to make any sense, I can just jump around and pretend that I'm a poet, which is all I've ever wanted to be in my life. So this is just a few pages from half of what Atlee Rouse knows about horses. His daughter's first horse came from a traveling carnival where children rode him in miserable clockwise circles. He was a sway-backed, patchy-coated Shetland pony with split hooves, but Tammy fell for him on the spot, and Atlee made a cash deal with the carney. A lifetime ago, just outside Robstown, Texas. Atlee managed the stables west of town. Laurel, his wife, taught lessons there. He hadn't brought the trailer. Buying a pony hadn't been on his plate that day, so he drove home slowly, holding the reins through the window, the horse trotting beside the truck. Tammy sat on his back singing made-up songs about cowgirls. She named him Buttons. No telling how long he'd been ridden in circles at the carnival. For the rest of his life, Buttons never once turned left. A year later, days after Hurricane Celia hit and everyone was digging through soggy debris for ruined photo albums and missing jewelry, an old woman from Corpus called Atlee about a chestnut mare. It wasn't hers. She had found the horse standing in her fenced backyard, soaked to the bone and spooked. "I think that storm dropped her here," she said. Atlee drove out and threw a rope, not around the mare's neck, but her hoof, then coaxed her into the trailer with quiet talk and sugar beet. He ran an ad in the paper, hung signs in the feed stores, called every rancher he knew. He named her Celia after the storm, and she turned out to be as fine a horse as he had ever seen, smart and sure-footed. No one ever claimed the old girl. That wasn't something he'd ever be able to parse. The most beautiful thing he had ever seen were the wild horses in Arizona. He'd gone to deliver Celia to a couple in Phoenix. They needed a companion horse for an old blue roan that was cribbing and stall walking. Atlee was going to miss her, and that must have been evident because after supper, a ranch hand said he knew something that would cheer him up, and they drove out to the Salt River. No one knew how long the herds would survive. The state considered them stray livestock and staged roundups without notice or due process. But Atlee saw 100 horses that first evening. He glassed the mesa with the ranch hand's binoculars and found the animals in the orange dust. They pawed the ground and threw their heads. They clacked their teeth and nipped one another, bucked and gave playful chase. Wind lifted their manes and tails. They bit at each other's knees and reared up and sniffed the air. When one of the stallions caught a scent, maybe of Atlee himself or the truck or the ranch hand's cigar, they broke into a run like nothing he'd ever witnessed. The herd spread and gathered, one tremulous and far-ranging body, until they came together in a gorgeous line, a meridian that divided before and after. Or was it right that he wouldn't turn? Tammy asked. She was fanning herself with an outdated magazine. They sat on a hot porch, rocking in chairs, hoping for a breeze. His daughter drove out to Seaside Acres every couple of weeks. Atlee was wearing his good denim shirt, a leather bolo tie, boots he had shined this morning or last night or last week or not at all. He was 80 years old now, and his memory was mostly leaked out. He couldn't remember how they'd gotten on the subject of Buttons. Tammy said, "I thought he didn't like to go right because he'd been going that way all those years." "Right was the only way he went," Atlee said. "They have memories like horses. He just remembered turning the one way." "He was a mean little shit," she said. "That's what I remember. His hobby was clotheslining me with low branches. He liked that crippled boy a lot more." "When this ends," Atlee said, When this is all over, sell the carousel horse to a collector if you don't want it. You say that every visit, she said. Let people fight over him at an auction house, Atlee said. And you didn't pay that man no money for buttons, she said. That's just the story we gave Mama. You told him the horse was hurting and you were confiscating it. You said you could do it one of two ways, but both ended up with us taking him home. Atlee tensed. He always did when Tammy mentioned her mother. That was the word you used, she said. Confiscating. I don't think I'd heard it before, but I've heard it since. I know what I said, he said. They rocked a while longer on the porch. Then Atlee began the considerable work of standing up. Had the chore not required such concentration, it would have put him in mind of the awkward struggles of a newborn colt, a weak and scared animal, blinking and frightened, feeling his legs for the very first time. A lost horse can follow its own tracks home. His wife had grown up roping and cutting cattle on a ranch, and the first time he saw her ride, the day Laurel applied to teach lessons at the stables, he knew he was cooked. When she let out the reins and dug her boot heels into the horse's sides, they were nothing but run. Well, hell, he thought, leaning on the gate, watching her ride. Atlee was 26. Laurel was 22. Riding agrees with you, he said. She was unsaddling her mare. I can teach all of it, she said. Western, English, dressage. I don't doubt it, he said. You sit a horse well. You've got a soft touch. When can you start? Really? Yes, ma'am, he said. We've needed a riding teacher for a while now. No, she said. She met his eyes. You really think I've got a soft touch? A year later, they had Tammy. A horse's heart weighs 10 pounds. The carousel horse had been a gift to Laurel, not from Atlee, but one of her students, the daughter of 2 lawyers. The girl could ride, and her parents took her around the world to compete. There was some hope for the Olympics. They bought the carousel horse at an antiques market in France, then shipped it to Texas. Basswood, faded eggshell body, royal blue and gold and crimson details. It had been on the outside row of the carousel, arrested mid-jump, 6 feet long. It had a horsehair tail, an elaborately carved saddle and bejeweled bridle, bared teeth and wild eyes and a braided mane. The story was that the Nazis were coming through and setting fire to everything, so if carousel owners had the time, they dug holes and buried their horses. Atlee didn't know if it was true, but he knew the Germans had killed as many real horses as they could, so it seemed possible. And Laurel loved that statue. Atlee fashioned it to the living room wall, and she gazed on it with awe. She was already sick by then. Thank you very much.
No? How about now? Ooh, yeah. So we're going to have to start with skateboarding, Bret.
Finally.
This is, many of you probably saw this. This is the cover of the Austin Chronicle with this really, really nice article by Caroline Drew about Bret and his work. And one of the things he said to Caroline Drew in the story is people betray themselves in their obsessions. So here we got Bret wearing what looks to me like a skateboarding outfit of some sort. a man who has been obsessed with skateboarding. And in fact, in your acknowledgments, you basically say, let me find that, sorry, what you say about skateboarding.
Remember what I said about it being terrifying to start with Steve Harrigan?
Okay, hold on. I'm terrified because I've lost my place. Finally, he says, it's remotely possible these stories would have been finished earlier if I'd skated less often. But it's a near certainty they wouldn't have even been started if I'd never stepped on a board. For that and everything else, thank you, skateboarding. So Bret, this is your obsession, right? I mean, one of them, but a presiding one, right?
Yes. This feels like a trap, Steve.
I was just going somewhere. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
What about skateboarding works in your writing life and vice versa?
Well, we're going to be here a while. I mean, first of all, thank you for doing this.
Okay.
Can we give Steve Harrigan a round of applause? I mean, in my mind, the similarities are literally endless. I think, and there's some skateboarders and have made the mistake of coming tonight. And I think that what we all know is that skateboarding hones a kind of discipline that is invaluable to a writer. As a skateboarder, when you're trying to learn a new trick, you're trying it sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of times, and you're getting hurt and sometimes badly, and you're doing this for days, weeks, months, sometimes years. And it's really the same thing that you're doing as a writer. You're taking things through draft after draft after draft, and you become comfortable with being uncomfortable. You become comfortable with how slow this process is and what it requires of you to show up every day. And so I think with writers, we're constantly kind of hitting this metaphorical concrete, and you just keep coming back thinking, I can ride away from this sentence. I can make this trick. I know that I have it in me. I'm committed to finding it. And so I think it breeds this ability to occupy a space where nothing is guaranteed, and there's a risk of real pain, but the potential is worth that risk. You know, I also would say that there's a kind of unwritten rule in skateboarding, which is every time you skate, you're basically required to do something that scares you, and so you become comfortable being afraid, and it can be an existential fear of, I don't know if I'm good enough to do this. It can be a physical fear. I don't know if I'm gonna break my leg on this. But you become inured to that fear, and you can move through it. Whereas most people, when they're afraid of something, they have a very natural reaction to go the other way. But skateboarders learn to occupy this realm in which you're pushing the boundaries of your fear, and I think that is where our best writing comes from as well, is when you're writing toward what you're afraid is true, and so it feels like these two things are braided together in my consciousness in a way that is honestly quite difficult for me to separate.
Writing toward what you're afraid is true is one of the greatest sentences I've ever heard. I mean,
Guys, did you hear this?
I mean, that's the job, right? And that's, I mean, the fear. We were talking about fear of falling, but fear of like exposing yourself, I think, is great. I knew I'd hit pay dirt with that first question about skateboarding. I mean, you really were eloquent.
Let's go to the reception, man.
Steve Ennis, in his really nice introduction, talked about the specificity of both the place and the language. You and I are both Corpus boys, and one of the great pleasures of reading this book was reading about Maverick Market and the Sea Ranch Motel, and I remember in Remember Me Like This, you kept talking about, or you kept writing about the H-E-B grocery store, because in New York they wouldn't let you just say H-E-B because nobody would know what it was in New York.
Mark Warren was not my editor for Remember Me Like This.
But the great pleasure of this book is indeed that specificity. Like explain to me the words "do what," which appear numerous times in this book when somebody's asked a question and they answer "do what," rather than "say what." And that's such a South Texas, I think, maybe all of Texas phrase, but it's one of those authenticity markers that really convince you that you're in the hands of somebody who knows what he's talking about.
Well, thank you. I think in the Carolinas, I think they say "do what now," like they add "now" to it. But it's very particular to Texas. And I mean, in my first books, again, and it's true that Mark was not my editor for those books. Enough said. But I had to fight the New York editors to let me keep some of those kind of colloquial phrasings and the specific syntax of Texas speech. I had to fight to keep them in the books. But it feels to me like that's how we come to know each other, is what are the particular ways in which we describe our life, and how does that relate to where we come from. And so I'm riveted by any time someone uses language in a way that is different from the way I know how to use it or how I've heard it. And it happens all the time on the page, and that's one of the great appeals of reading, is you get to hear these rhythms and textures of language that we might not be able to hear anywhere else. And it just so happens that I'm stuck with "do what,"
I keep you on that specificity theme a little bit. Can I just read 3 or 4 things that really struck me, sentences that struck me in this book? One of my favorite stories in the book is Time of the Preacher. And there's a great scene where a guy is looking for a snake in his ex-wife's house. And she is sitting on the kitchen counter, as you say, swishing her feet like a girl on a pier, while this guy is unscrewing the vent panel on the back of a refrigerator to look for what might be a snake, and he doesn't have a screwdriver, and he's using a knife instead, and so it's awkward. And there's something about that scene that just, you sold it so well with all those tiny details. The ex-wife on the kitchen counter, the vent panel, the screws. I don't think there's a question in there, but
Great.
But it's just that kind of thing, that solid description and specific description is throughout the book. And I would just like to read 3 more. The traffic on the highway sounded like waves plowing the shore. A mother in the story, Cayman, is frying flounder in a skillet after breading it and flour. And you write, the sound of frying started up again like distant applause. And then another time you write, the Milky Way looked like words someone had tried to erase on a blackboard. Those are so evocative.
They liked that one.
Yeah,
They liked that last one.
I like the flounder one myself, but
They didn't care for that one, but they liked that Milky Way thing.
So tell me how you. I kind of know how to write a sentence like that, I think, but I don't know that I've never written a sentence as good as frying flounder sounded like distant applause. I mean, do you remember writing those sentences? Do you remember crafting them and beating your head against the wall trying to get them just right?
I remember beating my head against the wall. No, I don't remember writing them, but I'm very flattered by what you're saying, and I'm very grateful. I think that it to a certain degree it goes back to the skateboarding thing of I find writing, and this is, people in here know this. This is not false modesty. I find writing unimaginably difficult, and my early drafts are so abysmally bad that by the time you read something or Mark Warren reads something, it's been taken through easily 30 drafts, maybe 100 drafts, and it's that labor of just constantly kind of digging through the language until I find something that feels surprising in its presentation and surprising in the way that it's described. But it is banging my head against the wall. It is not accepting, if we talk about skateboarding, it's not accepting a sketchy ride away. You know, I want the trick to be clean. I want to ride away in a way that I'm not off balance. I'm not fighting to not fall, and I want the sentences to feel that way as well. But they do not come easily. And so if I've taken it through 20, 30, 40, who knows how many drafts, I'm really happy to forget having done that and just think like, oh yeah, that was easy.
There are another quote in this story in the Austin Chronicle from you is, the three things that I write about are animals, families, and secrets. And as interviewers tend to say, explain.
I think Carolyn Drew said that when I said that sentence. And Carolyn may be here tonight, and if she is, I'm so grateful for this. And I've told her that you know, I've been extremely lucky in my career. I don't know that I've had as many people text me about anything in my life other than the Austin Chronicle. I thought, I'm not going to make a bad joke, I didn't know what happened when I woke up the next morning and my phone was on fire. I don't know what happened, but then what happened was Carolyn Drew wrote this kind article. So animals, family, secrets. So I went to grad school and went there with some very, very brilliant people, one of whom was later putting together an anthology, and she contacted a bunch of writers and said, I want you to find the piece of work that you're working on right now, and I want you to go back into your family attic or whatever and find the earliest piece of writing that you can find. And she invited me to do this. I did it. I went back and I found this piece of writing that it was a riveting story called "Is It a Bear?" And so I said, okay, I've done this. And she said, okay, now compare the two things. Compare what you're working on right now in whatever year it was, mid, 2010 or something, and compare that to "Is It a Bear?" And turns out all I ever write about are families, animals, and secrets. And I've been doing it since I was like in first grade. And and that was her theory behind the anthology, was that writers, it's not the thing that we hear so often of writers have every story, only have one story to tell. It's that the DNA of the writer is traceable from before you even conceive of yourself as being a writer. And for every person that she invited to participate in this anthology, it turned out to be demonstrably true. In my case, it's family, secrets, and animals.
Well, what was the first animal?
Might have been a bear. You know, I've just always loved. I've always loved animals. I've just always loved animals, and so the amazing story, Is It a Bear, is that my dad got me a black puppy, and he had it on his boots, and he said, "Will you go get my boots?" And I went over there, and there was this live furry black thing, and I think I had to write a book report for school about what happened yesterday, and so I thought, like, well, it's more interesting if it's a bear, and so I did that.
There's a lot of really bereft and bewildered men in these stories.
And a lot of bereft and bewildered men in this room. I don't think that was a bereft and bewildered man who was clapping.
But and there's always, it seems like, somebody somewhere missing in these stories. So typically a wife or a mother, runaway girl, dying wife, divorced, ex-wife. Again, I don't know it's a question, but it does seem to come up often. I mean, you're recirculating. I mean, every story is new and every story is really beautiful, but they're all circling back, it seems to me, to that theme of some guy trying to find his way. And are you conscious of that when you're writing?
I don't think I'm conscious of it when I'm writing, but we were definitely conscious of it when we were choosing the stories that were going to go in this book. So there's a handful of stories that have animals in them that take place in Texas that I'm really quite proud of, that didn't have that kind of thematic resonance that you're so kindly picking up on. And so we chose, when we were deciding which stories were going to go in the book, we chose those hoping that they might kind of harmonize with each other.
I'd like to know a little bit about how you know the stuff you know. For instance, in the story you just read, is it Atlee Rouse? Yeah, Atlee Rouse, half of what Atlee Rouse knows about horses. You seem to know a lot about horses. I've known you a long time. I've never seen you on a horse. I've never talked about horses with you. Is this stuff you picked up in your own life, or was it inspired by a character, someone you knew, and then you went and did research? How did that story come about?
So that story took, no joke, 10 years to write. It was a kind of sedimentary process of I would write one of those little vignettes about having something to do with a horse, and then I would just put it away, and then a year would go by and I'd write another one, and then I would read something about horses and it would stoke my imagination, and I'd write another one, and it probably still lives in my computer under a document called The Weird Horse Story, where I just kept adding things to it. And I do a ton of research for every single thing that I write, and I require my students to do research for the fiction that they write. My feeling is that research liberates the imagination, and it narrows the imagination as opposed to foreclosing on it. So I'm always doing a lot of research. I've always loved animals. If there's any germ of my own experience, I made a passing reference to it in what I read, where she says that that pony liked the crippled boy more. And so when I was very young, I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis in my knees. And I grew up in South Texas, and if you're a boy and you're growing up in South Texas, especially when I grew up, the expectation is that you are going to play football. And I was very, very young. I don't even know that I was in kindergarten yet. And the doctors told my parents, he's never going to play football. He may never be able to run. I'm not even sure he's going to be able to walk. And so I went through a bunch of treatments. I was daily had to have fluid drawn from my knees, and it was really quite grim. And my aunt and uncle had a Shetland pony. They actually lived in Uvalde, and they had a Shetland pony that they didn't want anymore. And my parents got it for me because I didn't have to use my knees to ride. And that pony was mean. It was really, really mean. If anybody else rode him, he would clothesline him on a branch, but he liked me okay. And then the rheumatoid arthritis went into remission, and I made a deal with my parents. Like, I don't exude football, but my parents were like, you can never play football. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, I'll go skateboarding, yeah.
So you had rheumatoid arthritis is in your knees as a kid. Did you have coulrophobia?
No, I'm not afraid of clowns, Steve.
Because I was terrified reading Paradeability. I suffer from coulrophobia, but it's such a great story.
Huh? You're safe here.
Okay. It's such a great story. It's about a man and his son wants to be a clown, and they're at a clown convention, and it's the most unlikely tangent a teenage boy could probably take to this father, but the father is just so wonderful about it, and I'm just curious about how that story came about,
Well, I believe I mentioned skateboarding earlier. So my buddy Bill, who's in the audience tonight, he and I was living in Boston and came down here, and we went on a skate trip to Houston, and we skated all day, and went to check into the hotel. I know for a fact that I was bleeding. I was drenched in sweat. I was probably mad because I didn't do a trick. I was not in a good headspace, is what I'm trying to say. And walk into this Marriott by the airport, because that was the cheapest thing, and there are 400 clowns. And if I were like Steve Harrigan, which all I want to do is be like Steve Harrigan, but if I had coulrophobia, I would have evaporated. But clowns don't scare me. So I checked in, and I was like, what's with all the clowns? And the hotel worker said, like, oh, yeah, they're having their annual convention here. He did not like the clowns. And I was like, okay, cool. Thank you. And then I think the skate park didn't open until like 11. Bill sleeps really late. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I just went to all of the clown convention panels. I would just sneak into their panels. And so I just like took notes. And here's how you know that I'm a good person. They had a lost and found. And in the lost and found was someone's like very, very lovingly decorated notebook about their clown life. And this was like a phone, you could stun a farm animal with how thick this thing was. And it was in the lost and found for days. it had such good stuff in it, and I did not steal that thing. But I went to all their things, and the thing that I noticed is that they were all, I mean, at best, the youngest person there was 60 years old. Many of them were in their 70s and 80s, and what I thought was, this is going extinct. This is an art form. This is an avocation that is, it's not replenishing its gene pool. And so then, I mean, I knew that I had to write it felt like a responsibility to write a story about the clown convention, and I thought it would be more interesting if there were one young kid there. Also, they were all mean. All the clowns were really, like, here's the thing about clowns. I was in an elevator, and there was a guy, like an adult, and he was not dressed like a clown, but he had a clown convention pass around his neck, and I was just trying to be nice, and I said, because by this time I had learned that there are basically 4 kinds of clowns, and so I said, like, what kind of clown are you? Trying to be nice in the elevator, and he looked at me with such disdain, and he said, I make their shoes. All right, this is my floor. I'll get off here.
I think we've got, I don't know, Steve, we got 10 minutes left or something like that. I know that there are probably a lot of Michener Center students here tonight, and Bret.
I forced them to come.
Bret is the director of the Michener Center, and I'd like for you to talk a minute, maybe we can open it up to questions if we have time, about the kind of feedback loop between teaching and writing, and what you get from your students, what they get from you. What you've been doing this, you've been doing it a long time, but you've been the director of the Michener Center for 9 years now, after Jim Magnuson retired. So can you talk a little bit about what teaching has meant to you as a writer and as a human, I guess, too?
I mean, it means everything to me, and it's a dream job. It's an absolute dream job. I get to spend my days with an amazing staff and faculty and students who care about the imagination in language in a way that is really unparalleled, and it also is a way that most everyone else in the world aggressively and consistently tries to discourage. So it's a dream job. I mean, I remember that I don't know if you've ever seen this, but there's a beautiful video of James Michener after he came back from the war, and he said that once he got back, he wanted to spend his life as if he were a great man. And he's very clear not to say he was going to be a great man. He was very humble, and he said, I was basically going to masquerade as a great man. And what that meant for him was that he was going to surround himself with the brightest minds, and he was going to ask the big questions with his work. And through his unimaginable gift and the way that he founded the program, he's given all of us that opportunity. I'm surrounded every day by writers who are asking the big questions, and they're the brightest minds, who are working today. And that's the gift that James Michener has given us. It's a dream job, and my students make me want to go home and read and write. They make me want to take my things through another draft because their work raises my standards. And I would also say, like, we're talking about the Michener Center, but UT Austin has a total of 4 MFA programs. I don't know of another university that has that many MFA programs. And then in the Department of English, they've got a certificate program for undergrads to study creative writing. We're in the Ransom Center, which has an unparalleled treasure trove of literary ephemera and drafts and how our favorite books are made. There's the Dobie Paisano program. I mean, this is an embarrassment of riches, the likes of which is unknown in the rest of the country. And so we're here, and it's a dream job.
Any questions anybody has in the audience? Steve.
So, a question for both of you. How do you write? Do you write on your laptops? Do you do like Mr. Michener on an electric typewriter? Do you write out longhand on a legal pad? For each of you, how do you do that?
I do all of those. It's important for me, for some reason, to have paper with ink impressed upon it. It just makes me feel like I've accomplished something. So I take lots of notes in longhand, and then I work on the computer with Scrivener, which is I've grown to loathe the word because I've had a lot of problems with it lately. So I use Scrivener to compose, but a lot of the research I do and note taking I do is all by hand.
I'm very much the same way. I mean, when I grow up, I want to be Steve Harrigan. I'll do whatever works, and sometimes it's. You do want your hand on the paper and on the pen, and sometimes you want to be at the computer. And the only thing that matters to me is that I show up for work every day. I don't wait around for inspiration or the muse or I feel like writing or anything like that. I show up every day, and sometimes it's on the computer and sometimes it's on pad and paper.
Anybody else? Well, since we're nearing the end of our time, I'd like to ask one last question. Also, inspired by something you said in the article. You told, is it Caroline or Carolyn? I'm sorry if I got your name wrong, but whoever, Caroline Drew. I thought all of the books had been written, you said, and our job as people who love to read was to make it through as many of them as we can in our lifetime. This is when you were a kid. I just didn't know writers were still a thing. And my question, and it's a very serious question and a very frightening question, are we still a thing?
Great, Steve. It was going so well, man.
Are we still a thing? Is it? I mean, AI is coming for us. I asked, I'm not going to read it, but I asked AI to write a paragraph in the style of Bret Anthony Johnston. And it was, somebody who didn't know writing, didn't care about writing, could have been fooled. And is this something that you talk about with your students? I also asked them to write something in the style of me, and I was totally fooled. Is there a horizon that is frightening or should be frightening to all of us?
I do ask my students to talk about me a lot. I say, like, let's plug in Bret Anthony Johnston to the old internet and see what we come up with. I've never done that exercise. I can pretty safely say I never will. And I know that so many writers are apprehensive about AI, and I understand it, but I have to say that I'm not one of them. I feel like ever since the invention of the pencil and movable type, I feel like we've been told that literature and storytelling are going to go extinct, and yet here we are. I also think that AI, to my very, very limited understanding, is doing such extraordinary things in terms of science and medicine. And I think it's on the verge of doing so many more things in those areas. And those can't be underestimated or overestimated. But the things that are the attributes that are allowing AI to make those kinds of progress, first and foremost, it's a profound efficiency. It's ability to operate on a higher plane of reason. Those are strengths when it comes to science and medicine. They are absolutely liabilities when it comes to the making of art and literature. I firmly believe that efficiency is the antithesis of the imagination. It might be the antithesis of empathy. So I feel like its ability to predict patterns and all of that's great for the sciences. I just don't feel afraid of it yet for literature. I really don't. I feel like we are drawn to art. I feel like we are drawn to books and poems and plays and scripts, to movies, to television, because we are fundamentally irrational beings, and we have very, very lousy memories, and so we don't learn from our mistakes. That's why we go to story, and it's why we make stories. So I'm just not afraid of it yet. I feel like as long as writers continue to be inefficient and irrational, we're fine.
That's a so, no fear of clowns, no fear of AI, and I'm so pleased to be able to have this conversation with you, Bret. This is such a great book. You're such a wonderful writer and such a great teacher, and by a happy coincidence, First Light Books is selling copies of your book outside, right?
Real coincidence.
Yeah. And so I encourage everyone to go buy a copy. And I think every one of I spent 2 weeks just kind of very slowly reading this book at night, a story a night, basically. And it was just such a great pleasure. If you're sick of Netflix, take a half an hour and read one of these stories every night, and your life will be greatly enriched, and AI will never come for you. So, thank you, Bret.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Ransom Center, Texas Book Festival, and thank you, all of you. I really appreciate it.